Hey, welcome to Reality Coaching for Writers. It's a new year. Hey, Eddie, how you doing?
I'm doing great. A little bit,
Great.
little bit,
So,
little warmer than last week. That's good.
yes, a lot warmer. I could have gotten a sunburn on the beach this week. Our question for writers today is, would you like to get a jump in this new year on other writers and avoid common mistakes that other writers make? So, just the real stuff here with Reality Coaching for
Okay.
Writers today.
That's right. That's right. So yeah, there are some familiar mistakes that a lot of writers make, and these aren't necessarily new writers. Writing is like any other vocation. You can have been doing it for a long time and started off with maybe a bad habit and just keep repeating the bad habit, until somebody points out, hey, you do this a lot. You just kind of do this a lot. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yes, and so Eddie, you mentioned one of the things that you see over and over again, especially in nonfiction manuscripts, is repetition, right? So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I like the way you introduced that over and over again. It's that is kind of the way it works. I don't know if it's writers not being comfortable with the subject matter, or not having enough material for the book. It may be maybe one or both of those reasons that oftentimes in the manuscripts I look at, the ones I'm working on, I'm trying to help somebody either a little bit kind of ghostwrite or tweak it or get it a little bit better. Um, I'm one of these that's always looking for the meat, right? And so once I have the meat of the topic, then that's it. I don't need a second helping of it. I'm ready to move on, and then I'll come to another section in that book, and it's basically the same meat reserved again, maybe in a different way, right? And I'm going, well, we've already covered that. Give me something new, right? And so that's one of the things I kind of coach my authors, my clients, to look for times where you kind of repeated the same theme. I'm kind of fixated this week on healing because it's a topic that's kind of come up on social media for me this week. But healing in Jesus's ministry, he did a lot of healing, right? And
Yes.
and so if I were writing a book on the ministries of Jesus and what he did, for example, I would focus on the words that he used, what the things he said, put those in a bucket of what were the themes of what he was talking about. Repentance, for example. I'd look at all the places he did repentance. Forgiveness. I'd take all the ones where he talked about forgiveness. Who's my neighbor? All the ones that talk about compassion and taking care of your fellow man. Put all those in a bucket. Each of those are their own separate theme. Healing, I would put all the times he did healing, put it in a bucket, and then that'd be done with it, right? Not bring it back up again in a later part of the book. That's the way I want to see a book kind of laid out, so that when a reader comes to a book, that one thing that they're really interested in, they can go to it and get all the meat in that one section. And that's really what I'm looking for as a reader and as an editor when I'm looking at books, is all in one section and not repeat it again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. And I like the way you said put it all in a bucket. Lately, I've really seen the value of an outline. And I was looking at a manuscript, just giving a cursory look to have a coaching call with clients the other day. And a lot of, she began with a solid mission, but then was a little bit all over the place. And the key, I think, for her is going to be to put a minute outline. Take her manuscript, take each paragraph and write just one little thing about it. And when she then looks at the outline, she can see where she's repeating or where that was necessary just to get her to the next thought, but it could be taken out. It also shows where you can rearrange things, like bring something up from chapter 3 up to the beginning, because it's really the launching point for the topic that you're going after. So I see an outline as such a valuable tool to the nonfiction writer. And I guess it always surprises me that they don't start with one.
Well, it is surprising, but it's understandable, because if you've got a message kind of laid on your heart that you want to get out there, a lot of times we don't think it through. We can't think it through until we get the whole manuscript written.
That's true.
Yeah. We don't know really what we're going to say, and so we just kind of throw it out there, and then later, that's what an editor is supposed to do, is begin to help us pull things back and put them in better categories. And but you're talking about outline. The same thing kind of works on each section of an outline. So, and this is in regards to style, the way you write, right? So, for example, if you're going to start a section with a story, a personal story, personal anecdote, or case study, maybe from a client or something else, then I recommend, if you're going to do that for each big section, then follow that same formula, right? Always begin with a story, so that the reader begins to expect, okay, in this area, when we get to the big heading, I'm going to get a personal story, right? And then I'm going to get into the meat of it. And that's another area where I see writers oftentimes slip up. They'll start, the one section will have a story, the next section starts with just a doctrine, for example. We're just getting into the preaching right away. And I'm going, what happened to your life story? I like the life story. The life story kind of gets me into you a little bit more. And I'm not saying one or the other is better. I'm just saying be consistent.
Right.
Be consistent in how you decide to shape your book in that section.
So we've tackled repetition, and how an outline might help, and watch for consistencies. Being consistent. One of my things that I see a lot of, that we have a word for it in editing called RUE, resist the urge to explain. And I see with a lot of it in fiction and nonfiction. I'll give you a great fiction example. Is in a tag, they'll say something like this very simplistic example, but she thought in her head. Well, you don't need in her head, because we know when people think, the thinking takes place in the head. So that's a perfect example of RUE. You would just eliminate the word in her head.
Yeah. And
that's very simplistic, but you'll see it on many levels then, of ways that you're not giving your reader the intelligence that they have. You're kind of coaching them on every minute little detail of the scene or the story. But we see it in nonfiction, especially if you know your target reader and you can guess at their life experience, then you don't have to lay out every tiny detail of a thought, because life gives us experience. And so you don't have to explain it over and over again. And then again, that'll fall into the repetition category too. If you've explained something that you did feel needed explaining because it was a complex thing that you were unpacking, then it's not necessary for you to explain it in the next chapter and explain it in the next chapter. Give your readers some intelligence that they can track with you now, that you've laid that foundation, and now they're standing on that as they read the rest of your work. So resist the urge to explain, or what we call RUE.
Yeah, so that you and I have been trained to watch for that, because we're writers and readers and all that. So, here's a homework assignment for our audience today. As you're reading through Scripture, look how many times there's RUEs in Scripture. You will see occasions where the individual stood up, they sat down, right? And these are things we just blow right by them, but we're going, well, yeah, you can't sit up. Well, I guess you could straighten, but but you don't stand down. That'd be kind of like laying anyway. So it's even in Scripture. Even in Scripture. Yeah, and this is more of the comment I'm going to make now is more for speakers. I guess probably maybe even for pastors, for preachers. To your point about the examples, I actually think when you're giving a talk, using examples is a bad idea, because once you give one example about something, then that narrows the focus down to just almost that one example. And people fixate on the example. I run into this all the time. If I wanted to use an event that happened and I said, for example, da 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 da, well, people immediately gravitate towards that event, and we start discussing that event. And I'm going, no, no, that was just an example. I'm not. That wasn't the main point. But that's the way we are, right? So to me, if you've got a big, topic, rather than give an example that your audience may or may not relate to, I would say put a phrase in there. Now, just reader, listener, audience, just think for a second of how this might apply to your life, and give them the space to think about it, right? And let that work, rather than giving
like that.
somebody going, well, that doesn't apply to me. Well, the bigger point does, but that example didn't. So that would be one way I would.
And that's such another good point, Eddie, because we often see in manuscripts, there's a point where personal story helps make, it serves its purpose. But if you get too personal and too detailed, then your reader says, well, that's where my experience ends with this, and they close the book. So you're right. I mean, you have to keep it large enough that you're not eliminating 3/4 of your readers, and that's kind of like when somebody's writing about their cancer experience. The temptation is to tell minute details about their particular cancer, their particular experience. But if they really want to reach more readers with the big thing they learned about walking with God through cancer, then they can't go so microscopic. They've got to keep the lens back a little bit, so that more people can then relate to the overarching lesson that they learned and they'd like to share with others.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as it gets detailed, I'm like, that doesn't apply to me. I haven't had cancer, but right. I've been with people that had cancer, so I can relate to that. But once you get into the details, I'm like, man, I hope I don't have to go through that. So let's move on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I wouldn't pick up a book on how to walk through cancer unless somebody I loved was going through it, or I was. So it is a niche audience, So, but even in a niche, you've got to be as large. You don't want to narrow it down too much.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm struggling to talk today.
What else did you have on your list? What else was on the list?
Well, mainly it's a tip. There are two things that I always help writers learn about, that if they don't know, there are just two ways to clean up a manuscript really quickly. And and this would be fiction in this case, most likely, but it'll also work for nonfiction. But we talk about showing and telling, and one of the best ways to really look at your manuscript is to, if it's male, put in the word he in the search, and just go through your manuscript for all the times he pops up, because every time he pops up, it's usually the start of a telling sentence. And you look at it, we need some telling in a story. We definitely do. But you want to look at that sentence and you want to give it the test and have it earn its space, its spot there. If the protagonist is female, then you want to put she, and you want to just search the manuscript. So that's just a real quick way of checking and going through your manuscript very quickly to find that show versus tell.
Yeah, that's a good one. I know Denise Locke and Andrew Merrill are really good at helping me before they'll even, when I'm going to send them something to kind of proof. They've gotten really good and say, good. First search for all the times you use the word just
Yep.
or then, and just go through those and clean those up first, Eddie. That'll save us some time and you some money. So that's really good because it is telling. It is telling and tagging and carrying things through.
The second thing that I find so useful is on in Microsoft Word, under the Review tab, there is a speech. Let me look at what it's called, but the thing is, it's so valuable. What is that, Eddie?
The thing that reads back to you?
Yeah, it's called Read Aloud Speech.
I think it's control.
Mine says read aloud speech. I just pulled it up, but
either Control M or Option M. I forget which one now. On my Mac, I've got my Mac set to be like a PC, and that key, I can't even tell you what key it is on the keyboard because the thing has been worn down. That's how often I use that feature. The read aloud.
In Mac, you do have to go through that extra step, but it's usually called Read Aloud Speech. And what I love about it is it's a great way to just listen to what you've written, I mean. And nonfiction, it's so key because you'll catch those repetitions as you listen. I cook and listen. I put every single manuscript I edit through that as the final thing. I just put it through that because clunky sentences will show up, typos will show up. Because of the monotone, it really, you're not having that voice inflection. You're not having anything add to it but your words. Your words have to stand and deserve, the space in your manuscript, and you'll be able to see that with that option. Do you put yours through that?
Oh, that's what I'm doing right now. I haven't been able to get to the coast to do the reading of Down to Davy Jones, which was part of my first of the year project. I needed to get that read aloud to make sure the final version is done, and I haven't been able to get off and do that. So that's what I'm each morning now. I'm doing a chapter or a section at a time, and with the monotone, just letting it read aloud. And you're right, it's a great tool because even if there aren't any typos and grammatically everything is correct, just the way the sentences or phrases are put together, something can either sound clunky. This is a 5-word sentence. This is a 5-word sentence. That's a 5-word sentence too. There's another 5-word sentence. We have all these 5-word sentences, right? And after you're listening to that, you go, I need to break it up, right? You need to add a little poetry, a little rhyme to it. So yeah, you listen to it that way, you go back and rework some of the phrasing. So it sounds interesting, it sounds better. I'll give you an example. On this one I'm working on today, there's a character that he got nicknamed Little Shrimp. Okay. The Nimitz calls him, you're just a little shrimp. You're just a little shrimp, right? So they're picking him. So in listening to it, when I started listening to it, the way it came across in the monotone was Whittle Shrimp. Whittle Shrimp. So I said, okay, that's what's going to happen. The crew is going to hear the bad guy say Little Shrimp, and they're going to pick up on it and start chanting Whittle Shrimp, Whittle Shrimp, Whittle Shrimp. So now I've changed his name to Whittle Shrimp. His nickname throughout the story is now going to be Little Shrimp, right? So it's just another way of digging at my main character and driving him down even further. But anyway, and that wouldn't have happened without the monotone reading of that.
That's funny. Yeah, I like that. Well, Eddie, what other simple fixes could writers start the new year with that would put them in a better, I think those weed words, and ly words, and I have a list of weed words to weed out of your manuscript, and we could offer that somehow if you'd like.
Sure.
It's a Word document.
One of the tips that I like to see in a writer, and this is not a rule. This is just a tip that I like seeing, and I think readers enjoy seeing, is what's called the pocket suspense. I think that's the term we use, is pocket suspense. Pocket suspense, and you can do that with any nonfiction that you're working with, or any fiction that you're working with. And what that means is you start that section or that scene, if it's fiction, the section if it's nonfiction, with a great hook and the beginning of a great story or tale or a problem or something else, but you don't finish it. You don't conclude it, right? It is a way of hooking the reader and making them interested in what you're getting ready to say. And the beginning of the story always has to do with the section. You can't just throw it out there just as a lure bait. You've got to deliver. But then you close it at the end of that section, right? So for example, I'm working with a client, it's a sports book, and I might start with the beginning of the last play of the last game of the season in the championship on the 3-yard line. This quarterback drops back and he throws the pass. And I may recommend he starts a paragraph like that. And I've built up, or the writer's built up, everything that's on the line for this pass. Scholarship, this guy's father's maybe dead, and if he doesn't complete this pass, he doesn't get to go into the next level, all this stuff. So there's a lot riding on this. The stakes are high. Okay. And you just hold it at that point. You just hold off. And then you get into the importance of goal setting, of dreams, of having a support team behind you, of going through perseverance, all the things that go into being an athlete in sports and competitive in life, And you go through that whole section. And in the end, you bring it back to the conclusion of the tale, right? Whether the guy catches the ball and win, whether they drop the ball and lose. Because at that point, if you've done it well, it may not matter to the reader. They want to know. But if it's an incomplete pass and the main character didn't get the thing they want, they may go, but he's going to be okay.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
So that's, like I said, it's not a rule. It's just a way of keeping your reader interested through the meat of the story to get back to the end.
I think a lot of movies use that tool, they'll start, leave you hanging, and then they build the story, and then you see what happens at the end. I don't know why Field of Dreams came to mind, but it did. So I have to look at that again.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I would recommend doing it every time, because eventually what will happen is you'll teach the readers to go read the first paragraph and jump to the end to see how it turns out. But it's a good technique, especially if you've got a lot of knowledge that you want to cram in that section, and it's going to be kind of almost boring, right? And you're trying to keep them interested, and you may filter in parts of it through the way. How about you? What other tips do you have?
Well, I think I kind of gave you my premium ones today. The outline, the give your reader intelligence, use that simple mono voice read back, and do searches for those weed words, and you'll already be ahead of the game. Your writing will be tighter, it'll be cleaner, and when you clean those things up, you also can see where something's needed or something can go. A client recently put down a whole personal story, and it took up several pages for this little snippet of her life. And when we were talking in our coaching call, I told her that might have served a purpose, all those pages, to give her 2 sentences for her introduction. And that surprised her, but she could see that. And I said, get it all down, write that first draft. And like you said, get everything down there. Everything will serve a purpose, but not everything earns the right to be in the book.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, so maybe the last tip I will give is, and it's kind of related to that, is there are, especially if you're writing memoirs, for example, I'm working with a client on kind of a memoir kind of book. We're trying to turn it into a novel. We'll see if that works out or not. But we've got these stories, and I tell these stories to my kids all the time. It's one of these things that I'll have to stop telling you stories eventually because I already know it. But it's a retelling of these stories. That's what we're doing. We're telling, right? Which can be pretty boring if you know the story, right? But I told the client, I said, just write it all down, just like you said, just write it down exactly the way it is. And if it's a good story, if it resonates and it needs to be in the book, we will take that and put it into dialogue. And we'll have a character relate some of that experience. We'll have some conflicting character come back with maybe a rebuttal or a questioning, or or no, it didn't happen that way after all. I remember it completely different, right? So you want some conflict, but in the end, you'll get that same information out in a way that doesn't bore the reader. And if it was on a film, it would make a great scene, because you would have the two characters basically arguing each other, maybe throwing, pizza dough at each other. No, it's not like it's not. This doesn't go in. It goes in this way. The sauce goes in first way. Well, I think the sauce goes in last. And at the end, you know how to make grandma's favorite pizza, and your two characters are covered in dough, tomato sauce. They've got mozzarella cheese in their hair. They're laughing. They're having fun. And then the next thing you sit down, eat the pizza, and go, Grandma thinks this is great, right? So that's the recipe that you were going to print up in the book. You turned it into a funny scene with some conflict and some characters, and it's the same information. So that's what I always say. If it's important to you, write it down, and we'll find a way to put it into the voice of character so that it's fun. And this works for nonfiction as well, especially this probably is more aimed towards nonfiction writers, because they're so interested in blocks of information, which just makes the eyes glaze over. Put it into the voice of a character, even if you don't know them. Make it up. Put it into the voice of a character. Any character that says anything in a nonfiction book, that information is going to carry more weight than if you just write it in a prose. It always will.
Huh. Is there any example that comes to mind that you've read something like that?
Anytime, if it's a sports book, anytime the coach says something, it's always elevated. I mean, you just believe the coach. If the quarterback says something, you're going to believe the coach because he's got authority.
Now, so would that be quote form or dialogue?
It's in dialogue,
okay.
and that's what I coach my clients. If they're writing a nonfiction book, I encourage them to use the creative license that you've been given as a writer, and that means they go, "Well, I didn't ever have a coach say this." I was like, I have no idea how many things Vince Lombardi ever said that he actually said. I don't know. But it looks like Vince Lombardi spent his whole life doing nothing but spewing out wisdom. And the same thing with Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra, I don't understand how the guy ever played baseball and managed, because all he did is spend his time giving all these wisdoms, right?
Yeah.
And people believe it. So that's it. If you've got a good zinger, put it in dialogue, put it in the mouth of somebody, and it'll go viral. People go, well, I guess that coach for the Notre Dame, he said it. Lou Holtz. Who knows how many times Lou Holtz has actually said what Lou Holtz says?
So you're saying use a character. We can't use anybody famous. Don't go putting words in anybody famous. That's not what Eddie's saying.
Yeah, just make it up. It's something as simple as my high school football coach always said.
Yeah.
I don't know who your high school coach was. I'm not going to look you up either.
Right. Yeah.
When my boys ask me these things, where did you get that? Like one of my sayings is, if you're waiting on me, you're backing up. And the one that I say to my grandkids all the time, you just about got it made. You don't all the way have it made, but you just about. Both of those I attribute to a guy named Red Faison, who was a warehouse manager years ago. I don't know if Red actually said them. I could have picked them up somewhere else, right? But it always goes into the Red Faison bucket. Wow.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So we hope we've given you a few things that you can just put into your daily writing experiences so that you'll be ahead of the game this year. We want y'all to have a great start. We're here to help. Let us know in the comments if there's anything you'd like us to talk about this year, any ideas you have for us. And I will be taking my Christmas tree down January 7th. That's the tradition in my family growing up, because it's Orthodox Christmas. So we always left our trees up for our neighbors and friends that were Orthodox. So I'm enjoying it so much. So it's going to be packed up this weekend, but I thought I'd let you enjoy it one more time with me. So
Yeah,
also, the temperatures are warming up. If you want to visit the beach, come on down.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I like the Christmas tree, and I like, and maybe we should get you to start putting up some of your little morning surf shots, surf videos that you're sending to me, and let some of our readers see the morning shots. Those are nice. So
okay.
Well, listen, y'all have a great rest of the week. We will see you next week at Writers Coach, Reality Coaching for Writers, the real stuff and no fluff. And we will see you next week.
Real stuff, no fluff. Bye.